we could start by just listening to you as a point of departure. I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about afterwards. What is it that you are studying, and where are you in your proposal preparation?
So I'm studying the interplay between digital communications and IFFs. So my study is my location for my data collection is Gauteng, and I'm currently I am drafting my data collection instrument.
Oh, you are at the instrument development level, okay?
Yes.
Are you the nature of your research? If we use the approaches of research, qualitative,
yes,
quantitative, and mixed methods, which one are you on?
Okay, I chose grounded theory. I chose a qualitative approach.
That's qualitative, right?
Yes, qualitative, and I'm using the grounded theory technique. So the idea, the rationale behind this choice is that I'm developing a theory. I'm testing a theory that digital communications are facilitating IFFs in Gauteng. So
what is IFS?
IFF, illicit financial flows.
Nondokozo, I'm following you. So it's qualitative and it's grounded theory. And you said, what is the rationale again?
The rationale is that I want to tell. Okay, the rationale is that. Okay, I'm trying to use the right words. Is that the rapid adoption of digital communication methods could have affected or altered the modus operandi of IFFs, illicit financial flows in Gauteng. So the reason why, yes.
Gauteng as in, is it a particular sector or Gauteng just as a province overall?
Gauteng as a province, when I submitted my proposal, the feedback from I think it's the examiner, I'm not sure the name of the team, they'd said I should look at it from the perspective of South Africa, considering the borders and the definition of illicit financial flows. They speak about borders. But my supervisor said it would be too big a study for a master's. Yeah. So we would rather go to Gauteng, because my initial study proposal, I had said Sandton, because in mind, I'd say that in Sandton area, that is where you get that's where the concentration of yes.
No, I still want you to define for me Gauteng, because remember Gauteng as well as a country, it means a lot. So are you looking at, who are you talking to? Like if you talk about IFF and the digital technology, those are variables, right? These are variables. So if you then look at the location, which is Gauteng, geographically Gauteng it's massive.
Correct.
So what is your unit of analysis? Sorry if if you and I have not had the time to talk about units of analysis. When I talk about units of analysis, I'm talking about what or who is being studied here. What is your target in Gauteng?
Okay, I'm talking to forensic and compliance experts or specialists, and I dropped a pin at the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners in Pretoria, because that's an institution where they are all members. So I moved away from SAPS or Financial Intelligence Center, because I'm trying to get them to contribute towards the profession, not to their institutions. I see there's a bias.
You see now, if you see you have to qualify that to say this is my unit of analysis. You're saying forensic experts.
Yes.
So why don't you say that study, that the digital communication and the IFF in Gauteng, but with particularly where you are particularly focusing on the forensic experts in Gauteng. So basically it's Gauteng, but you are not going to go to Alexander and knock at people's doors. You are not going to go to Tembisa and engage people. You are not going to talk to Soshanguve people. You are not going to go to you see what I'm talking about. You are not going to go to you are not going to go to Diepsloot. You're not even going to entertain Soweto for that matter, let alone Randburg and so on. So basically, you've got a community that you are looking at, which is your forensic experts in Gauteng. Are these forensic experts having a community that you are looking at? I'm talking population now. In other words, you're saying there are practitioners that are under a certain body, right?
Correct.
So you'll be identifying those that are within that are within the IFF space, and you engage those.
Correct. Okay.
Now, if I'm not a forensic expert, just for your sampling, you are not going to talk to me, are you?
No, I won't.
So if I'm a good, wonderful police officer working very well with all kinds of criminals, would you be talking to me?
No, I won't.
So you see, that's important, because the unit of analysis will also help in formatting your sampling strategy, especially because you said it's qualitative. So you're not going to use a big sample. You're probably just going to go for a smaller sample. How much of this subject has been studied?
It's limited, Prof. That's hence I opted for a grounded theory, because it allows me, how I understand grounded theory is that I can maybe interview 3 or 4 and then develop a theory and then take the survey instrument. And so that's my question on the survey instrument.
Yes,
what is it going
important.
to look like?
What you said is also very important in how you frame your background and your context of why this study is important, because basically you just answered that significant point, which is, what is the significance of your studies? That is very limited. In other words, little is known about it. This is the reason why you're choosing qualitative and grounded theory. So the size of your population or the sample is immaterial because it's qualitative. Do you agree?
Correct. I'm following.
So I think you'll do well in confirming that information that you just shared somewhere in your context and in your background, because in any case, a proposal is a chapter that keeps on being improved. So I think I'm getting the gist of it. But it's important for you then to say you are focusing on digital communication, that interplay with IFF, focusing on forensic experts in and around Gauteng, which is basically the context within which this study is going to be done. Because then for me, when you say Gauteng, but you are not saying forensic experts, what I missed there is the units of analysis.
Prof, my proposal was approved.
Yes, no, there's nothing wrong. Remember,
okay.
A proposal gets approved. As you work, you'll be allowed to make some amendment and adjustment at the end of the submission. When everything is said and done, you are still able to go back and now rework on it, because it's a chapter. It's chapter 1 of your work.
Okay.
So it's not that you have to. It's not that you have to go back and withdraw it. It's you are now going to strengthen it in order for it to be much more solid. Because the reason why they accept it at the entry level is just so that you've got something to work from. But obviously, your proposal right now, when you talk about reliability and validity, I'm sure you're going to say, oops, I didn't know much about reliability and validity at the time. But now that you do, it means you are able to look at your proposal, because it's not just a proposal, it's how you are putting the plan together for real study. So it's allowed that you can adjust it as you go along. That's the essence of why you need a proposal to be as good, because the proposal, remember, it actually defines the work in its totality. The collection, the analysis, and the interpretation of that data is not much of a challenge.
Thank you so much, Prof.
So please don't feel stressed about your proposal that you submitted, Nontokozo. When you're going to look at it and look at what you would have done now, you'd realize that, wow, It's good that
True.
I put a so the first version of it is not going to look like the last version of it, because then the last version, that's when you really put the nuts and bolts, and you yourself you are able to say, I can see variables now here, digital communication, I can see the IFF, I can also see the units of analysis, and the fact that I'm focusing on forensic experts in Gauteng. You may not necessarily say this is the unit of analysis, but you can put it in your proposal just so that you can see it at the glance, at the glance. So that's the point.
Thank you, Prof.
Hi, Malevo. I'm sure you were listening as we were talking to Nondogozo, and you're getting one or two ideas of your own proposal. Let's hear you out.
Yes. My topic is exploration of investigative procedure of blood stain pattern analysis in crime reconstruction in murder cases in Gauteng.
Wow, that's quite a mouthful. Take us step by step. Again, exploration of
investigative procedure of blood stain pattern analysis in crime reconstruction in murder cases in Gauteng.
Also, are you going to explore how the blood stain are being analyzed or are being investigated?
Yes.
Or what is the gist of it?
Yes, I'm going to explore the procedure because blood stain pattern analysis is difficult to interpret it. So that's why most of cases are being withdrawn or not withdrawn, because murder, they kept on cold cases.
But now, if I were to, and please, pardon us, because this is also another sophisticated area. You're not making us investigators, but we just want to hear from a research point of view. So now you are going to look at the procedure. So is it about the procedure that is being followed, the investigative procedure that is being employed when it comes to blood stain patterns analysis?
Yes.
Okay. So what is it about this procedure that you are interested in? I mean, I'm putting in quite a lot of variables, which is fantastic. But now you're going to explore this investigative procedure. So meaning your focus is on the procedure.
The procedure, actually the aim. My focus is on the aim.
On the
aim of this research.
No, but the research itself, sorry, your focus of this research is you're going to explore the investigative procedure
itself. Yes, it focuses on the blood stain pattern analysis.
Yeah,
on the procedure.
Yeah, before we'll come to the blood stain pattern analysis. The focus.
Okay.
The focus of your research is you're going to explore the investigative procedure. If we just stop there for a moment, right? Let's just pause there. You're going to explore, let's say explore. You're going to explore the investigative procedure. Now I'm saying, what about this investigative procedure? Not leave the blood stain pattern analysis for a moment. Is that what you'd like to explore? The procedure, this procedure that is being followed for this investigation. Is that it, or you've got more interest in the blood stain pattern analysis? Because these are two different things you are raising there. You understand? Are you following us, Malevo? There are two things there are two things that you can do. You can look at the procedure. You can actually explore the procedure, the investigative procedure, or you can also explore. You are also talking about the blood stain pattern analysis, which is a different connect. We are connecting the two now, where you are then say, okay, I'm going to look at the procedure that is being followed when it comes to blood stain pattern of analysis insofar as murder are concerned. And then Gauteng is fine. I can relate to that. But what I want to know is, what is it? Is it the investigative procedure and the blood stain pattern analysis that you are going to look at? Because you have to have both, all these variables clear. I give you the floor.
Prof, I can say here I'll be talking about the investigative procedure in blood stain pattern analysis. I'm focusing on how to go about investigating blood stain pattern analysis.
So you want to explore the procedure, the investigative procedure that is being applied when investigators are dealing with blood stain pattern analysis.
Yes.
But you are not necessarily looking at the blood stain pattern analysis. You are looking at the procedure thereof. Do you get us? Do you get where I'm going with this? Your focus is on the procedure.
My final everything. I want the action that was taken when investigating this blood stain. I wanted that procedure to get the result, the good result. I wanted that.
Hey, you want to know how did you investigate the blood stain pattern? How did you analyze the pattern? Because for you to get the blood, you need to have a procedure to investigate that. So that's what I'm saying. It's your interest in the procedure thereof, of how that is being investigated. Malebo, I'm asking a question to say, your research interest, in other words, the interest that you are pursuing in research, is about the investigative procedure. And the investigative procedure might be different for blood stain pattern analysis with other kind of procedures for other crime patterns. We accept that. But I'm saying, is your interest for this investigation around the procedure that you would follow when you analyze blood stain patterns, or what is the interest of your research?
Actually,
because if you are going to investigate the procedure only, you are simply going to say what is being put down as the procedure to investigate blood stains, right? For you to come to an analysis. So that will be the procedure. Now, procedure will be outlined, I suppose. So you're looking at whether this procedure, I mean, you can look at the procedure to say, is it sufficient? What is wrong with it? What is right with it? What are the gaps with it? That's the procedure, but not necessarily the blood stain pattern analysis, because blood stain pattern analysis comes once the procedure has been followed to the T.
So you mean this is two different stories?
No, not different stories. There are variables that, in other words, you're going to say there is you need to be clearer as to, are you going to explore the investigative procedure? Because investigative procedure will be set down. There will be an investigative procedure that is outlined, I would imagine, right? So in other words, there will be the A to Z of that procedure, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's what you are exploring. So then it means you're exploring that, but you are relating that procedure to blood stain pattern analysis only. So in other words, you would say there is other procedure that is used for other things, maybe let's say there's thousands and thousands of investigative procedure. I'm making a scenario. Your interest is not on these other procedures. It's only insofar as the blood stain pattern analysis is concerned. Now, I'm asking the question. This is just for you to think a little bit more. Is it then that you are exploring the procedure, because that's the different thing from looking at the blood stain pattern analysis? And there's nothing wrong with what you're saying, that perhaps it impacts on the outcome of many cases of murder. Because if the procedure is not followed to the T, or if the procedure is weak, or if the procedure is incorrect, there could be a lot of procedural flaws. I mean, there's nothing wrong in research investigating that as well. But it may be that maybe that's not what you are saying. Are you following the discussion, Malebo?
Yes.
So I'm saying there is nothing wrong in what you are saying. You just need to really be clear to yourself as to, yes, I am looking at the procedure, the investigative procedure, but this investigative procedure is limited to blood stain pattern analysis, not any, but also insofar as murder is concerned. So you have defined it, but therefore, when I read your findings, they must be talking more to what is the issue with the procedure from a research point of view. Is there anything? So you are going to read more about procedures or investigative procedures for blood stain pattern, whatever, but you are talking about the procedure. You are not talking about the blood stain pattern analysis per se and murder. So you are simply going to talk to us about the procedure. And my question to you is it what the gist of what you want to investigate is about? And if not, you are welcome to reformulate your research topics is to cover or to say what you want to research. I hope it makes sense.
It makes sense, Prof. But already I've already being approved.
Submitted, yeah.
In all
remember I said the same principle I said to Nontogozo. When you start with a research proposal, really you can be as broad and as unorganized as possible, but during this kind of engagements, because at the end of the work, you may then submit a final proposal, because now you are wiser. You actually understand the processes better. But it also depends on what is the proposal meant to serve. If you are going to go out there and do research per se, for example, at the PhD level where you're going to collect data, there will be measurements that will be used, and it might be that you find yourself having to revise your proposal. But the proposal is not written once off and then you forget about it. You write it and then you keep on improving it, because at the final work, it becomes your chapter 1 of your thesis anyway.
So because now I'm on data collection. I had my own topic. Then I think the panel changed my topic to this one.
We're not changing your topic. We're not going to change it. We're not saying there's anything. Yeah, we don't want to overwhelm you and say there's anything wrong with it. We're just saying, as we engage you, you're going to realize that, yeah, there could be 1 or 2 things that you can still adjust. And when you're talking about data analysis, I am still going to come back to you when we talk about reliability and validity. Doesn't matter where you are, but it's your study, so you are the one who need to defend it, and you will be the one who need to really lecture us on when you've got your final submission and your final analysis and interpretation of the results. I hope we are not overwhelming you. When you say yo, it's like I'm towards the end of my work. And we not say go back.
Yes.
We just say if there is a way to strengthen your work through this engagement, you will strengthen your work through this work. I mean, you are at the data collection. I'm still going to ask you what approach which approach are you on? Qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods?
It's qualitative.
It is qualitative. So what instrument are you using to collect data?
No, I design questions and use the open-ended questionnaire.
What is so? Are you doing interviews?
I'm done with them.
No, I'm saying the instrument that you use to the instrument that you're using to collect data, is it an interview?
No, I designed questionnaires and send them via emails.
But
I requested.
But you said, did you say qualitative or did you say quantitative?
Qualitative.
So, but then how do you do questionnaire on a qualitative? Because a questionnaire is largely used quantitatively. Oh no, let's not overwhelm you. Malebu, let's not we don't want to lose you. We want you to come back. Let's give you drink some water. We'll engage. But please just pay attention. We are not saying there's anything wrong with it. We said there could be huge improvement empirically on the work that we are doing. Because at the end of the day, the idea here is just to share knowledge and to strengthen each other. So please don't be overwhelmed with this conversation right now. I'm fascinated by the work that you're doing, all of you, and I just hope that you find this engagement more appropriate to align your own proposal at whatever stage that you are. Because as I said, the proposal is not done and dusted, it's not cast in concrete. As you work through this conversation, you can also work through your proposal. But for today, before I ask, is it Pella G? Oh, sorry, I may butcher your name. Maybe today what we need to talk about is the approaches. I'm going to talk to you about approaches because it sounds to me that this is some little bit of conversation we will have. What are you doing, Pella G? I don't remember us talking though.
My title is A Critical Analysis of Conflict Between International Law and Indigenous Laws in Burundi.
Oh, okay. So
yes, I am in the Department of Public, Constitutional, and International.
Give me is the conflict between international and domestic?
A critical analysis of conflict between international law and indigenous laws in Burundi.
Now, let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, Palaji.
Yes.
There is no doubt that there will be conflict between the indigenous law and the international law. We don't doubt that for a moment. Now, what I want you to, it's a qualitative study, am I right? It sounds qualitative from the get-go.
Yes, it's a qualitative.
So do you have particular sets of laws that you are looking at internationally and critically analyzing those, looking at which indigenous laws as well? How just take me through that briefly. In other words, when you say international law, there might be a set of laws that you are looking at, and you are working with indigenous laws, in particular. What? Just paint the scenario for me. But I'm saying we agree that it's qualitative from the get-go, right?
Yes.
Okay. Please proceed.
May I start by my research questions?
Yes, sure, no problem.
Yes. The research question that the statistics is to answer is, the first one is, what are the effects of the levirate customary practices on women's rights? That is my first.
Oh, so you're looking at, so you don't mind if I interject you, right? As you speak.
No problem, Prof.
Oh, okay. So one of the first discussion, or among maybe not the first, but one of the discussion,
Yes.
is that you are looking at the rise of women from an indigenous way of, indigenous. It may not be law. Will it be a law indigenous, or what is more indigenous? It may be something else if you say indigenous, and maybe you want to look at whether how does that compare with the international laws on the rights of women.
What I want to show in my studies is how indigenous laws, for example, the case study is taken from Burundi, how indigenous laws clash with international law, especially in women's rights.
Yes, but I'm saying, let's take Burundi, like we do, as part of the African continent, for example.
Yes.
They will have indigenous way within which they are according rights to women, right?
Yes.
And that I'm saying, I don't know how much of the literature review you have done already, but I want to ask, would there have been an indigenous law in those many years ago? I don't know how far back you go, which would have been indigenous law. The word law from an indigenous African old way may not necessarily have existed.
Yes.
It could have been something to do with maybe customary, or the way of practices, or something like that.
Yes, is in that way is customary, and it's about the culture, customary.
Yes.
Is in
so
that way.
Are you then looking at what was the culture, or what was the practice, or what was the custom that was practiced to respect the rights of women in those years in Burundi, and comparing that with the international law on women, for example?
Yes.
Okay. No. So that's one area of focus. What is the other? What are the other areas, if any?
Let's see. Sorry.
Did you already do a proposal that you submitted?
Yes. Yes, I did, and also me. I am a little bit try to draft like dissertation. I almost done the draft of my dissertation also.
Oh, okay.
I just wait for a feedback from my supervisor.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So but I'm interested in your collection of data, because it sounds to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to be looking at the various sets of laws that are international. But before you do that, you also have to look at what is obtaining locally. Like, for example, you compare, because you have to compare situations that are pretty much the same for you to do a proper analysis, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's qualitative in nature, and you've got sets of questions. These questions are intended for who? Who's going to be your participants?
I didn't do the interview in my dissertation because actually I am based here in Pretoria. So we discussed with the supervisor, and she suggested me to take out the interview with. So
to take out
the interviews.
Oh, okay.
I only use the books, and
so you're just gonna rely on documentary
yes,
evidence of some sort. Okay.
Yes.
So yes, I agree with that, because that's your data collection. Remember that we call data collection. So how are you going to collect data? You say you're going to rely more on documents and legislations and all that, right? So you're not going to interview participants, because it doesn't look like you'll need that. I don't think that will be necessary.
Oh, I'm gonna use the government document. I'm gonna also use the books.
Did you already complete literature review? In other words, did you already read about? Okay, you already done so.
Yes, I almost done. I am collecting by myself, but I also sent the first draft to my supervisor, but she's not yet to give me a feedback. I just wait.
I see. So so tell me, how far back do you go on your material that you are using? Do you have a particular time period, or it is just going to be whatever is available? In other words, do you look at the period and say, when did, like if you take Burundi and you say, I'm looking at period X and period Y, or it's just really going to be as you receive, as you get information?
Sorry, I didn't hear very well the question. It's about the document that I am using.
Yes, I'm saying how far back in terms of timeline do you go, and how far do you, because if you say indigenous and international, I may want to know which time period are we looking at.
No, I tried to refer to the recent document, like 15 years ago. I tried to not go.
What is the why are you going 15 years? What is your reasoning, if I may ask? Because in research, every step has to be justified. What is the 15 years informed by?
I had that we have to try to find the resource that are not too old than if I am not.
Oh, okay. You are guided. You are guided by the literature review part that says maybe source. But okay, let me then go back. Your critical analysis of the international law and the indigenous law. Which period of the indigenous and the international law do you want to look at? I mean, for instance, if you talk South Africa, for example, I would say somebody can choose to talk about South Africa during the colonial period, or somebody can talk about South Africa during the apartheid period, or somebody can talk to South Africa during the democratic period, or somebody can talk to South Africa during maybe the 2000, the new century, whatever. So there are certain time periods that you could look at, but you're still looking at the country, South Africa. Similarly, with the continent as well. I mean, the continent has gone through a whole range of different periods of its life. Now, the question I have for you, and if you don't have a view on it, you can. It's fine. I want to know: do you have a period within which you are looking at the indigenous and the international law, so that your critical analysis is based on that? despite the fact that for literature review, you are relying on the information for 15 years. Am I making sense to you?
Thank you, Prof. I realized that there is somewhere I didn't not went through. For example, I started like in a literature review by colonial period. So I brought that to show from the colonial period until now, when now we are.
Okay. Yes, but
Yes.
that's fine, Palaji. So what you may want to do, just to make it, remember with qualitative research, yes, there is a need for literature review, but you are really going to give us a new way. I mean, you are going to generate some theory. You are not confirming anything, but you are going to, you said yours is going to be a critical analysis. So a critical analysis is going to be based on how you collected data on that, how you analyze data on, and how you interpret data on it. But for me, if you then have a period within which you look at this, and maybe there are some themes that you want to compare. For example, I was quite comfortable when you say, I'm looking at the rise for women, for example. Now, the rise for women in Burundi have always been there, and they've always been respected and maybe observed in a particular way from an indigenous point of view. Now, you look at that and you say, how did the international law impact or affect that recognition of right? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Or whatever the case might be. I don't know what your analysis will be looking at. But it's really bringing the two together as one area of focus. That is why I was saying, what are the other themes that you are also looking at from an indigenous laws, and maybe not necessarily laws, as I said, I mean, many years ago, they may not have been called laws, maybe customs, tradition, or something like that, as compared to what the law says on them. It could be a number of things, I mean, really. So, because international law tends to permeate a whole lot of our societies in many respects. So you can pick certain areas that you are focusing on, because otherwise, if you are going to do the whole of international law, I don't know, it might be too broad a discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
That
Prof.
makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Think about that, but it's still a good idea that you are doing a critical analysis of the international law and the indigenous law. But you can also say, although with a particular focus on or references to certain aspects in Burundi. So you can look at those areas and say, if you look at the international law, you compare it with the indigenous law in that area. Otherwise, as I said, I mean, Burundi as a country is quite big and broad. So for you to look at everything international law there, it might turn out to be quite overwhelming.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Palaji. But please participate in other conversation if you find that there's something that you want to add as we go along. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, because now I'm learning too much during this workshop.
Yeah, well, Godfrey is listening to you. Godfrey is listening to you. He's my boss.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, let's just once more look at, ladies and gentlemen, the quantitative and qualitative comparison, because now I'm beginning to realize that some of you have already, because you've already done your proposals, you have nailed your mask in the, you could put your colors in the mast, because now, if we talk about quantitative and qualitative, it looks like there are some of you said, I've gone quantitative, I've gone qualitative. Earlier on, when I was talking to Malebo, I got a little bit concerned because she's quantitative, but she said I distributed the questionnaire. I wasn't sure. Maybe it's just a matter of semantics or understanding what you are talking about. But let's see if we can get that right for our sake. Now, in any research, anywhere in the world, you're going to find that there is qualitative and there's quantitative approaches to research. And of course, that when you combine the two, we call it mixed methods. So you will find that you can combine the two, or you can choose one of one of these approaches, depending on what you are studying. It's not necessary that you should be doing both of them. It depends on what you are studying. But again, as a researcher, you need to be familiar with the two approaches, just so that when you make a decision on choosing one or either one of the two or the three, you know exactly what it is all about. Now, when you look at qualitative, and this is just a summary of it, when you look at quantitative, if you say to me, I am conducting or I've adopted a quantitative approach to my study, these are the elements that you can use to summarize what quantitative is and how does this compare with qualitative. There's a lot of literature that you can go through just to compare the two. And you don't necessarily have to use this one. You can use any other literature that you find useful for your sake. So for the purpose of us today, let's look at them quickly. Quantitative has, the purpose of quantitative is to do with studying relationships or cause and effect. When you say relationships, it's like a relationship between A and B, So relationships can either be positive, negative, neutral, whatever. So you're looking at what is the relationship. It can be causal relationship, it can be correlation. There are relationships that you can then say there is a relationship between A, which is a variable, and B, which is another variable. For example, the reason why I kept on asking Malebo the variables when she was talking about the investigative procedure and the blood stain pattern, for example, I was trying to check if she's exploring the relationship, or whether she's exploring whether there is any form of influence or impact between those or amongst those variables. Why? Because the last time when we were speaking about dependent and independent variable, we're saying in research, you're going to have that variable which influences the other variable. So in quantitative, that's very, very important, because you need to check what is the relationship. Like we used the example the last time, the fire and the smoke. And you said fire is an independent variable. So in terms of the relationship, there is causal. Fire influences the dependent variable, which is smoke. Now, in terms of the design, when you look at the design of the approach, which is quantitative, is that you normally develop what we call a hypothesis, which you develop upfront. A hypothesis is like an assumption. In other words, you put an allegation that there is this problem that you are seeing and you want to go and test. So you actually go and test that theory because you already have a view. So it's almost like I'm accusing you of something, then I go out, collect data to justify that. So basically, that's how I can try to simplify it. The tools that it uses will be your pre-selected tools. Like, for example, when you do a literature review, because with quantitative, your literature review is going to be quite extensive. And therefore, you are able to come up with predetermined instruments like your questionnaire. Your questionnaire, which is really going to have a set of questions, a majority of which are closed questions, yes or no. Do you agree that today is the coldest day of the week? Yes, no. Do you, those kind of questions which are predetermined, largely they will be more leading, but closed in terms of yes, agree, disagree, and so forth and so forth. And then for the sampling part, the quantitative it uses large samples. Large samples as in the population must be bigger and you have to draw from that population, because it is so much so that you cannot interview everybody in the sample. And in terms of the analysis, you're going to use statistical analysis of numeric data. So you're going to look at the large sample, and you possibly, as you know, when you look at the statistical analysis, is where percentages are used, that of my 300 people that I gave the questionnaires, 60% of them are in agreement that today is the coldest day. 40% say it's not really the coldest day. So if 60% agree today is the coldest day of the week, then we all going to say 60% agree that today is the coldest day of the week. So that's just an example of how the statistical analysis of the, in the quantitative study will be conducted. On the other hand, if you look at the qualitative, which is what we're trying to explore right now with most of you, it examine a phenomenon as it is. So basically, you're going to look at the digital, as I mean earlier on when Togozo was speaking about the digital communication. She's just going to explore that and get answers as they are given to her in the way that they are being given by people that she will be interacting with, because you are just going to ask for their views, their opinion in rich detail. So they will talk to you about their own views on IFF, and also how that is, has any relation with your digital communication. Now, in terms of the design, it's very flexible. It evolves during study, so it's inductive. So meaning you are able to generate theory. So you are not going there with predetermined views. You go there with more of an open mind, that you can be told things that you don't necessarily agree with. Whilst on the other side, if you look at the quantitative, it's almost set in the way that it is set. So we don't allow flexibility there because it's structured, whilst this one is unstructured. Now, for the tools, you are the one who's collecting data. So in a questionnaire, for example, you can have people that are going out to go collect data for you, like you've got field workers. You can put an app, send to people. They do it in their own rooms, in their own houses, and so on. So you don't get involved as a researcher. Whilst in this one, qualitative researcher, you become the primary tool of data collection. So you yourself, you are the one who's going to ask, what do you think about this? Is there a challenge that you think we need to take note of? So basically, you're collecting the data. Whilst, on the other side, if you look at the sampling, the qualitative approach use small sample. So basically, it's not obsessed about the sample, because it's not about quantifying the variables. It's really just for you're getting information for different purposes. Now, in terms of the analysis, then you use narrative description and interpretation. I mean, if Palaji says, having looked at the international law, comparing it with the indigenous law, this is what is emerging. And she can cite such situation and say, for example, if you read on the rights for women, this is what the international law say, and maybe it contradicts what the indigenous law was saying on that, and treatment of women and treatment of women in both scenarios, and so on and so forth. So basically, that's the difference. So when you say to me, I am doing qualitative, it doesn't mean you should really turn a blind eye on the quantitative. You need to understand what makes the two approaches different. As I said, then the in between is the mixed method. This is not to suggest that these approaches are rigid. No, it's just to say they are distinct categories of the polar opposite or dichotomies. That is not what it is. They complement each other. It is just the way in which you frame your study, your research, that matters. That it will be better if you adopt this approach, because the quality of the data might be much more authentic, much more solid if you follow this approach rather than the other approach, or if you do both approaches. So that, ladies and gentlemen, becomes my story on qualitative and quantitative approach. First is that you need to have an approach, you need to adopt an approach, and you need to justify why this approach. In the main, if you look at qualitative, it's if there's very little known about the phenomenon that you're investigating, or there's little study done, limited study done, and so forth, then you're tempted to go to qualitative. However, on the other side, if you are really looking at how big the problem is and there's a lot that has been studied on, you can go quantitative. But remember, as you go quantitative as well, you need to know that the sample should be large, because you can't go to, and large doesn't mean thousands and millions. It could mean just in hundreds, 200, 250. And a questionnaire, you can get a lot of people answering it, as quickly as possible. We will talk about reliability just now and validity. But I see Advocate Castro.
My topic is the protection of foreign investment in South Africa. It's an analysis of section 9, 10, and 12 of the Protection of Investment Act of 22 of 2015 against the customary international law protection. And my period is focusing around the democratic dispensation, simple because of the redress that need to be done around the issue of the land question. So I don't have my material, but I'm at the advanced stage, so to speak. But I felt that I need to get to know, to refresh my mind and just master this thing, these approaches from different lectures and mentors. So that's why I decided to join you. So yeah, basically it's a what can I say? Basically it's a I want the proper words. Yeah, but I think the discussion with the last colleague there about Burundi almost similar. So I've already picked a few things around there. That is why I managed even now to respond and give you henceforth the period that I'm focusing at.
Oh, okay. Do you find some of this conversation helpful though?
They are, Prof. I don't want to lie, they are.
So there's something you mentioned which I think I find interesting, if you don't mind. You're now focusing on a period 1994. Did you say that?
Yeah, 1994 up to date.
Yeah,
it's a question of redressing.
Yeah, you see, that to me is very important, and I think for the benefit of Phalaji, this is what we were talking about when we said, if you set up a period, then you are able to say, my study goes from this period henceforth. You are allowing for a review, if somebody wants to look at your study in context, because then they may say, this study, it might be a limitation, but it's actually a good principle, because you then say, I'm not going to look at 1910, and I'm not going to look at 1652, and so forth and so forth. Meaning, you are saying the relevance of your study is insofar as 1994 is concerned, but also your perspective is so far as redress is concerned. So that's important as I would say as landmarks of your study.
All right, thanks, Bob.
So if somebody comes and they want to focus on doing your study, they may have a different perspective from what you are looking at. But that's okay, because basically they're saying, I see you focused on the redress, and I see yours was in 1994, henceforth. I would want to look at the same, but I'm looking at not redress, but perhaps something else. So you see, that's basically the beauty of research, because research built on each other. It's not like you are doing anything in a vacuum. So that's perfect, because you can then say, my limitation is I was focusing on 1994 and redress. And in future, this is my recommendation. So anybody can pick up your study and they'll say, wow, this is great study. But maybe Castro didn't look at this element, that aspect, this period and that period. That's basically what makes research a fantastic field. and acknowledgement that you had some limitations.
Yes, because my now will definitely focus on the primary and secondary research sources that are available. That will include the legislation, the case laws, even journals, because there is a quite number of work that has already been done around that. But like you are saying, Prof, there's a build up. I'm connecting from those, coming with my own angle, trying to address those challenges, especially in the light of that debate of section the expropriation of land without compensation.
Okay, something also important you're saying, I just want to check this. You're going to rely on primary and secondary sources. Is there anywhere where you will talk to one or two experts in the field?
It's a desktop method, Prof.
Because remember, if you do, you speak to one or two experts in the field. What you shall have achieved in research is what we'll talk to last, triangulation. Triangulation meaning you are collecting data from multiple sources, and that then gives your study a lot more strength. Not that you don't have to do it, but I mean, if you were to get one or two people in that industry from 94 to now, surely they will give you a view, and you don't have to get it fixed. I mean, you can ask them what they think about this, and they share with you views, and you capture those views as they say them, and as they. But it's a consideration. You can think about it, and then when you write, you then say, how did you triangulate your data? I triangulated my data because through collection of primary, secondary, and interviewing an expert. That basically say you used multiple sources to triangulate your data. It's a good principle that you can think about. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but it just makes for a very technical explanation. Well, even when you talk to a lecturer and you say that, it sounds like, wow, this is a good way to say that you did something amazing.
Yeah, all right, Prof. Thanks.
Think about it. Okay, let me go to. Thanks for the indulgence, Castro. Let me go to Zwe.
The issue of qualitative and quantitative.
Yes.
Yeah, I know we have discussed it. I was there. I think you also asked me. I think on our first
and mixed
session.
Methods.
Yes, and know that from the first session, obviously with today is the third time that you are talking about qualitative and quantitative. But I still, now and then I find myself confused. What confuses me? It's when I draft a research proposal and I send it through, and I'm saying I'm going to be doing a questionnaire. And obviously, if I'm doing a questionnaire, it means that, and if it's an open-ended questionnaire, it means that it's a quantitative, not a qualitative. But then when I submit the proposal, I say I'm going to do a qualitative, and the school gives me a thumbs up. I feel like maybe if the discussions could start then, that if you want to do qualitative, you should consider restructuring your questions due to 1, 2, 3, or you should consider changing the method from quantitative to qualitative, things like those. Thank you.
Okay, so all you want is to understand when and how do you choose an approach between quantitative and qualitative, or because by the time you develop questions, you should have already decided which approach you are following. Remember, this thing starts from the topic itself, how you phrase a topic. The way you're phrasing a topic will tell us that this is going to be a qualitative or a quantitative. For example, you heard when Pelagie was saying she's going to conduct a critical analysis of the indigenous and international law. You heard that point in Burundi.
Yes, I did.
Now, I said to her, that immediately sounds like a qualitative study. Now, that is at the topic level. Do you hear that? You heard that?
Yes, I did.
So for me, it will be very interesting if she was then to say to me, no, it's going to be quantitative, because from the phrasing of the topic, I'm suspecting that is qualitative, and she agreed with me that it's going to be qualitative. She has already submitted this as qualitative. Now, if we come back to you, Zwe, it's also about how you frame the question. Now, when you say you're going qualitative, then the next question is, when you get to hypothesis, because it's qualitative, that may not necessarily be an issue, because qualitative, you don't need a hypothesis. It's like you're going to generate theory. And you heard what Nontokozo also said, that she's going to generate theory around the digital communication and the IFF, that illicit flow. Now, those are qualitative discussions. So I expect that when it comes to the population itself and the sampling, they are going to adopt that which is qualitative. When we come to the research design, the method and the instrument that they are going to use to collect data is going to be qualitative. In other words, they are going to either say interviews, or she's going to be saying, I'm going to rely on documents, like what Castro was saying, that I'm going to be more guided by primary sources, which is legislation from the 1994 to now. So essentially, those things complement each other. Now, when you then say to me, I'm going to do interviews, like individual interviews or focus groups, or the instrument should be qualitative. Now, where I had a conversation with Malebo is when she said she's qualitative, but then she's got questionnaires. Now, a questionnaire, naturally, is a quantitative instrument of data collection. So if you say you're qualitative, yet you're going to use an instrument that is quantitative, do you see the issue for me there?
I do, and I agree. Hence, I said I feel like more training on qualitative and quantitative, especially to masters and PhD students, it's crucial, because most of us, we go there and say, I think maybe the issue of interviews and questionnaire is also confusing as a student. We don't understand that if we are saying a questionnaire, what is a questionnaire? And if we are saying it's interview, how do we then differentiate between questions on interview and questions on the questionnaire? Thank you.
Yes, but I'm saying the questionnaire is an instrument of collection of data. Can we agree on that?
Yes, I agree.
So before you get to the questionnaire, you need to have already decided which instrument, which approach you are adopting, qualitative, quantitative. And for you to know which approach you adopt, you need to also know which topic you are following on, because the topic or the research process is the one that determines how you're going to conduct your study. Now, the way you phrase your topic, your problem, your question, it's actually important for me to then say, then you are going quantitative, or you might use mixed methods. But I think I hear you. What you are saying is you need us to have a more focused discussions on qualitative and quantitative, the steps and the approaches, and why do we do this, and what do you answer for that? And I think we can prepare something for that purpose. So I will engage Godfrey, and we can package that conversation so that as it flows to designs like your like your collection of data instrument, analysis of data instrument, and all that, sampling and everything else, at least we shall have given you that context. So I'll mark it down, and I think we'll follow up on it. So that will be, for your sake, we'll put something for that as well. Hope that will work for you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we'll work out how to infuse one of the conversations we'll have just on qualitative and quantitative and the steps and the influences and everything else that. So maybe we'll expand a little bit on that table, just so that we don't talk about sample. We look at when do you, how do you, and what do you, and all that, those kind of things. So we'll consider that. Malebo, I'll come to you, but let me listen to Eva. Kai. Eva, go ahead, please.
Because I am doing a comparative study with other jurisdiction, because I'm hoping to propose a new law that doesn't currently exist. How many?
You're doing?
Comparative study.
Okay.
A comparative study. So how many countries is too
many? You are
many?
doing comparative study on what? On
so it's based on mass resignation of directors. So it's a comparative is a comparative analysis of the implications of mass resignation of company directors, right, in corporate governance under South African company law. So my question is, how many countries is too many, and how many countries is too little?
No, you can compare. You can compare with 2 countries. You can compare with 3 countries. You can compare companies to companies. But I must ask you questions first.
Yes.
Comparing 2 companies is acceptable. They can be local, as in regional, like countries in the south. There can be countries between the rich and the poor, middle and low income. Basically, but remember, before we go there, let me check something. Yes. Is the mass resignation of directors, a big problem?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so if you what are you comparing? Are you comparing the resignations, the mass resignations, or contributory factors of the mass resignation? What are you really comparing? Let's just for argument's sake, we've got Iran and South Africa. Pity Iran, because now they are being killed. So they are in a war zone. So what is it that you are looking at? Are you looking at, is the mass resignation of directors in Iran at the same rate as the resignation of directors in South Africa? What is the focus area?
So it's mainly the impact, how it impacts shareholders, how it impacts companies, and also the fact that there is no regulation.
There's no regulation for that.
So I'm basically trying to see if what we can gather from other countries that do have legislation covering that. So,
okay.
Yes. So basically, it's a comparative study on the laws that are in other countries and what we don't have in South Africa.
Oh, I see.
What the impact has been without the relevant law.
So are you then going to look at, say, for instance, because if there's no regulation, maybe the resignations are a bit chaotic, and you compare that with, so maybe then you may want to compare with a country where there is a regulation and you see how that plays itself out.
Yes. And
then the question will be, the question that you want to answer is the mass resignation in our country, say for example in South Africa, where there is no regulation, compares favorably or unfavorably with maybe jurisdiction where there's a regulation for mass resignation of directors.
Okay. Yeah.
Sounds good. It sounds good, because then your area is, therefore maybe you are then testing, is the regulatory framework that is in place in those countries, sort of protecting them against whatever the implication is when there's mass resignation, especially for the shareholders and staff, as compared to where there's no regulation. So basically, you are testing the regulatory framework against the non-existence of regulatory framework.
Yes, and also balancing it with, the right to employment, also our constitution as well.
Yeah.
So trying to see how that can be applicable in our constitution.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds something that you may want to do, but then it's qualitative, is it not?
Okay.
Is it not qualitative, because you are simply going to rely on the regulatory framework? Of course, you may talk to 1 or 2 people, but you don't want to talk to 300 people about it. I mean, there would be doesn't sound like there's a point in doing so, is there?
It is, because I have to rely on information. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you will need to interview 500 directors to say, well, there's because they've resigned in a massive way. So,
yes.
So the resignation is happening. So that is not what you are looking at. You just want to look at whether there's protective regulatory framework that is enough to buffer the shareholders and what have you in the process, and maybe other elements that you'll be looking at. So it doesn't sound to me that you need a lot of people to be talking to for that.
No, I don't. Okay, perfect.
Okay, that sounds like it's a qualitative study.
It is, yeah, it is.
Okay, have you completed your proposal?
I'm still busy with it. I'm almost done. But
okay. No, you can factor in all these conversations if they can be of assistance to you.
Thank you so much.
I admit that I might not have done things accordingly, but my question is, it's actually I'm looking for advice. What will be your advice on my? As that I understand it must be qualitative method because my sampling is too small. I don't need too much of participant. Then what will be your advice? Must I go back, redo the interviews?
No, I think Malebo, let me correct myself on behalf of the people that are here. What we are saying is your study is focused. I mean, are we talking about the investigative procedure, right? We're still there.
Yes.
No, what we are trying to say is, if you look at your topic, when I read it from, I mean, I'm writing, I don't have the full picture, but I'm relying on what the conversation is. It's about, you're saying you're exploring the investigative procedures, right? The investigative procedure, insofar as the blood-stained pattern analysis of matter is. So we were just dissecting it variable by variable. So what you can do is, indeed, you can focus on the investigative procedure, and you can ask questions about the investigative procedure for those people that are involved to say, does this procedure empower, is it enough? Does it empower you? Is it sufficient? All those questions you can phrase, but the questions will be more on the investigative procedure to the extent that it gives the analysis a lot more to work with. So there's nothing wrong with your topic.
Okay.
What we're trying to say is, for you to get value out of it, it means your focus is on the investigative procedure, so that you don't have the temptation to talk about the blood-stained pattern of analysis or something like that, because that's not what you are exploring. So if that is what it is, that means you need to relook at your questions to say, are your questions loaded more to discuss the procedure, or you are quickly looking into other aspects like blood stains, patterns, and so. Because if you do so, now when you talk about reliability and validity, you'll see what the challenge will be. So, but if your questions are framed in the procedure and you raise questions that are more in the mode of the procedure, and you are not going to do questionnaire, because if you do questionnaire, you can do a questionnaire, because if you do a questionnaire, maybe you are saying there is so many people that are involved in the procedure, so I want to know from them. I mean, let's say, for example, within the system, you've got 10,000 investigators that are involved in the investigative procedure. That's enough for you to draw a sample from them and to go quantitative. Does it make sense? Now you can go quantitative and you can say to them, the procedure that is applicable for blood stains and is this. What do you think about this procedure? Is it sufficient? Is it so? You can formulate closed and open questions, so you can have a mixed methods. So again, we are not saying go qualitative. We are saying maybe you want to go quantitative, in which case all the people that have got something to do with the procedure itself, this investigative procedure, can be sampled. And they are the ones who can either agree with the questions or disagree. So they will give you information on the procedure, and you can even suggest to them, what do you think needs to be improved on the procedure? Even if they said it's good, they may give you ideas that maybe this, maybe that. But you can work on statistics on it, that there's 10,000 investigators, 250 of them have answered your questionnaire. You've got a set of questions that they answered. Now you can have your 60, 20, 40, 50 percentages, because then you can work on them together. And you can have remember, with the questionnaire or with the quantitative information, you also have a biographical data. How many women, children, years of experience in investigation, and so you can categorize all that. So your study can be quantitative as well. Nothing wrong with that. I hope we're not throwing you so much under the bus, Maleb. I'm worried about you now. Does it make sense? So the question for me is, nothing wrong with your study, except just be clear on whether your study is for exploring the investigative procedure, which is what it is, and that is so insofar as the blood stain analysis is concerned. You're not analyzing, you're not looking at the blood stain analysis, you're looking at the procedure, investigative procedure. That's what we were discussing.
Okay. But
is it helping a bit?
Yes. I'm clear now. But
I'm glad.
Yes.
If we were doing quantitative study, just to complicate your life now, Maleb, we were going to test you. We were going to do a pre-test when we started, and then we do the discussion, and then we do a post-test. Then I was going to check your level of understanding of your own topic as we started and as we end, because that's also an instrument that can be used in research. But if you say you are clear now, I'm very happy. I know you are clear as so far as how far we have gone with this conversation.
Yes. One last question.
Yeah.
Because now my research is more on bloodstain pattern analysis. Even the questions I used.
Oh, okay. More of your question is now you just need to see how you reformulate your topic, so that you don't just explore the investigative procedure. You understand? Perhaps you also want something that link your exploration to the blood stain pattern analysis. So that's fine, because the number of questions that are on blood stain then means you may miss the target by focusing on the blood stain if the research topic is about the investigative procedure. Same principle that we are applying now, assuming that you are exploring just the investigative procedure in relation to. So just see how you reformulate the topic, just so that you bring the blood stain analysis into it.
Okay.
But it's not the last conversation we'll have. I think as we keep on talking, perhaps you'll get that light bulb moment where you then say, wow, this is what I was looking for. This is how I'm going to connect my exploration to the blood stain on it. For now, perhaps we're still in the midst of this, but when you get the idea, then you can bring it, and we again just play around with it like we do just now. This is unfortunately how this program works. We deal with real cases, because if we come here and we just talk about what is in the theory, that's gonna be very easy. But if we deal with real life cases like what Yokai is giving us, like what Zwito is saying, what Pelagi is saying, it makes the whole discussion for me relevant than theoretical. So if you get that, bring it back, and then we'll talk about it some more. Are we good?
Okay. I think maybe there's one question you didn't answer about my method of. I said I chose, or you answered, maybe I missed it. I said I chose qualitative, but then the method of data collection
is quantitative.
It's quantitative.
Yes, and then Zwe answered you to say, much as we talk about the qualitative and quantitative, she wants us to have a focused discussion on quantitative and qualitative, and I'm offering that we will have that discussion.
Okay.
Because I think if we just discuss it in the way that we do, perhaps we miss the fundamentals of the approaches. So rather let's have a focused conversation on qualitative and quantitative. In any case, a lot of you here are more talking qualitative, and I think some of your studies might actually be a combination of quantitative and qualitative, if we can just perhaps discuss those approaches well without making them theoretical but more practical. So if you don't have serious commitments in the next few weeks, just monitor where Godfrey is going on that. So we'll have a chat soon about it. We'll make it as simple as possible. So then we can bring the two together in that conversation.
No, thank you very much.
My question, I'm just hoping, this would be a platform where I can ask, based on what the previous lady was asking. I'm more of a mixed method student.
Okay.
I'm a master's student. I've got a little bit of a dilemma. I hope I won't take too much, providing a bit of context. So I'm tracking and tracing learnership learners over a 10-year period. So the learnership takes an average of about a year. But I intend...
Is your study longitudinal?
I wouldn't say longitudinal. So I'm just tracking a specific qualification in a learnership. So my main focus is looking at the impact on employability. So it's completers between 2014 and 2023. So initially, when I was busy with my proposal was accepted early January. Back then, because I think my head was not in the right space, and sometimes not really having sufficient information. When I submitted, I had opted for explanatory, sequential explanatory. And why sequential explanatory? The main aim on the quantitative side would be to establish how many completers, as in how many people completed, and then those that completed, how many were able to obtain work, and a few other variables like, how long did it take and so forth. And then the qualitative part, looking at the impact of the learnership itself, so more of self-reflection. Were there any specific skills that they gained, any challenges, and any recommendations maybe for the future respondents? So that was the initial plan up until I think maybe a month or so ago, when I had just completed my chapter 2 and then was busy with chapter 3. Then I landed in another class. It was more on the quantitative. So the lecturer was also offering one-on-one consultations, because my main concern was, there was just something bothering me. Something was not making sense with the sequential explanatory and in essence where I was going. And I also needed my data collection tool validated. So I had two, one for the quantitative, and then for the qualitative, I was aiming for semi-structured interview. So after that consultation,
what was the other instrument? You said you had two instruments.
Yes, so one is an interview guide for the semi-structured interview, and then the questionnaire to gather the quantitative aspect.
Data. Okay.
The quantitative data. So after the one-on-one consultation, and realizing that my approach, which is the sequential explanatory, there isn't really anything that is motivating the results of the quantitative to influence what I'll be asking in the qualitative. That's when the lecturer then suggested the ideal approach would be a convergent. So we even went through my questionnaire and the interview guide and the questionnaire and combined, and so far everything is good. So I've just received my pilot results. So tomorrow I'm having an appointment with a statistician just to validate. Now, my question on this platform, Prof, is that seeing that I'm looking at, over a 10-year period. So in essence, like how many learners completed in 2014, 2015, and so on.
So your 10-year period is 20. What is your 10-year period from? Is it 2014 to 2024?
Yes, 2014 to 2023. Yes. So each year I'm calculating how many learners. But now my concern,
the learners, sorry, Nomhle. So these learners are within which sector or which environment are you drawing from?
It's CHETA, the Chemical Industries Education and Training Authority.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Yeah. So everybody that participated, whether they came in at 2018, finished in 2020, I just want all that information. So my concern right now, in my that 3, I had included a table because my initial sample calculation was based on the sequential explanatory mixed methods. But now, since things are a little bit different, what is your suggestion in terms of, do I aim to calculate the sample per year, as in the year of completion, or do I take whatever is available? Because my other biggest challenge is CHETA. I had requested, even because of the POPIA Act, I had requested their email, the participants' email addresses, but because of POPIA, they are unable to provide. So the other alternative, I said, okay, if they can give me the numbers of completers. But today, then I heard that, the system crashed. So some of the data is missing between then and now. And I'm actually partly circulating this this instrument through like social media, like Facebook. It's electronic. So yeah. So what are your thoughts in terms of my sampling? Do I still maybe aim TAMSAC, look at the per year population, or whatever is being offered? I must just, because for now I'm unable to even estimate. I wouldn't know whether maybe over that 10-year period it's 2,000 people. I don't know. So that's just my dilemma for today.
And it's a dilemma for us too. Let's see if we can figure out.
And
let's see if we can figure out.
Sharing is caring.
Yeah, you came the first time and you're already giving a very big problem that we are unable to resolve. This is great stuff. Yeah. On a serious note, Nomhle, let's see. I've got a couple of engagements that I need, because it's very easy to think you understand only to find. I don't want to mislead you. That's the first thing.
Yes.
So now let's talk 2020. I mean, you answered me on the period. You are looking at 2014 as the starting point, and the cutoff is 2023. Am I right?
Yes. So the inclusion criteria any learners who completed between those years, 2014 and 2023.
Okay.
So any new learner
let me
who
for my sake,
they don't qualify.
Yeah, well, that is a, you are talking about probability and non-probability sampling. We'll discuss that as we go along.
Later,
we're going to discuss that. So basically, if I qualified outside this period, I'm out. Before the 2014, I'm out. And so now let's go back.
Yes.
So now, if you take 2024 and 2023, let's say December, that gives us, let's say 10 years, right? You're talking about learners over the period of 10 years, that is 2014 and 2023, right? So they are just learners.
Correct.
Now, then you've got another criteria that you say you want to see those that completed. You said completers. Did you say completers? Something like that?
Yes, so the very same learners, I'm tracing them. So the criteria is that learners should have undergone this learnership between 2014 and 2023. And if they qualify, the next step is I want to establish their employability status. So
no, but coming back, no, listen, let me just check something, because I just want to take step by step first, because I'm looking at how you're talking about how you are going to sample them. You said now there's a category that you call completers. Did you say completers or something like that? So
yes,
who is a completer? Just take me through the learner who you'd say this is a learner, but this one is called I will call for the distinct categorization a completer.
Okay, so a learner who's a completer, they underwent the learnership. They were assessed internally and externally, and they have competent. The certificate. Yes, competent. So they have the qualification certificate.
Okay, let's call those ones completer. That's one category, right?
Yes.
They are learners, but they have been found complete. I'm just looking at an operational definition for the ease of engagement. So now,
or maybe we can even say certified learners.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe we can even call it certified learners.
If I'm a certified learner, in the period 2014, 15, whatever, there's no period. I can be certified in any of the years. I mean, between 2014. So now there will be a value that you attach to completer between 2014 up to 2023, isn't it? Let's say there is a number which is a value for the completers in that period, right? As a group of learners.
Yes.
Now you say there's another element that you are looking at, which is those that were employed, those that found employment.
No, it's the very same people. I want to track whether after completion, were they able to find employment? Because with the learnership, the proposed idea from the Skills Development Act is that the purpose of a learnership it's to increase employability.
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to evaluate.
So meaning this category of completers, you're going to say how many are they? 2015, 14, 17, all the way up to 2023. Then you'll have a number, right?
Okay.
So
Correct.
You'll then say, and the number might vary in a particular year.
Correct. Yes.
So do you then have data for 2014, 15, 16, all the way? Because you may want to have data like that first, which says how many completers were there in 14, in 15, in 16? Because even when you look at employment, you may find that they are being employed randomly, isn't it?
Correct. Yes.
So in other words, the employment might be that although I completed in 2017, I got employed first before somebody who completed in 2014. So there's no prioritization of the employment as a basis of competence, isn't it?
Correct.
So I'm saying then you might want, because that can be a factor, that can be something that is also a variable that you want to analyze. That how is it then that you've got a learner who was certified in 2014 and still unemployed, yet you've got this learner who got competent during COVID and is working, is employed. What could be what could be a contributory factor to that, right? I mean, it may be a curious fact.
Mm-hmm.
And it could as well be that, is there anything that can be done to prioritize? It's almost like, those RDP houses that those who registered first expect that they will be given those houses according to that list.
Houses
I mean, if I registered, so maybe that's another consideration as a factor that you want to, argue with from a research point of view. And therefore, a solution might be required for that. Because it could, for me, I'm curious, why would I'm declared competent in 2015 and somebody declared competent in 2014 is working? What could be because remember, it's about employment that you are saying you're dealing with over the 10-year period.
Yes.
But listen, I think I get the gist of the discussion. I don't think we'll have enough engagement time for now, if you don't mind.
Yes.
What we then will do is that maybe when we deal with population and sampling and these strategies that we are talking about, because I think when you started talking about convergence and sequential, I was worried that you're losing all of us, because Malebu want to know now how do you now get to sequential and convergence when I'm still putting my proposal together and I'm qualitative? And then I said this is longitudinal, and he said no, it's not longitudinal. So maybe rather than biting them in the way that we do, but I think you are getting where I'm going with it, that you may want first to get data that sort of talks to year on year, and then you look at from that number, you say this one got employed. Employment is random, like it is really not linked to anything. So you can actually, it's like just throwing in a pot and you're lucky to be picked up as opposed to any other person. So maybe that's the issue. But then you also want to know, is there a concerted, organized, coordinated employment strategy that is being put by both the employer and the sitters to assist in that regard, something like that. I don't know. Those are some of the questions that would want to ask you, but let's not rather ask you in an haphazard way. I think you put the suggestions. You are going to meet a statistician to firm up the tool, but to me, it sounds like it's a discussion that will take us forward.
Okay, no, that's
so
fine.
So maybe after you have met a statistician, what we are going to do is that we are going to ask you to just take us through where you are in terms of because I think it's about the population. The population is the totality of the learners that are considered in 2014, and that's good enough. So it's quantitative, and maybe there might be qualitative where you look at the employment and the employability. Because the other thing is, are the skills so desperately needed? I mean, if you look at the learners and the employer, the question is that do we have enough employers that are looking for that skill that you are learnershiping for? Those could be some engagement that we can have.
Yes, definitely. It's a scarce, the qualification I'm looking at, it's regarded as a scarce skills.
Yes. So it could mean that the powers that be, because remember that one of the challenges of scarce skill and also employ young people is that the old people like us are refusing to let go. So what then happens is I am required to employ young people, but I'm still using the old system. I mean, it's like knowledge. If you have not studied in the last 10 years, but you are the big boss in a company, sometimes you find yourself still relying on the old knowledge, despite the fact that you might need new information. Hence, somebody was saying that they were told, I think it was Pelagi, that you don't look at 10 years. Studies that were done more than 10 years ago, they are not wrong, they are not irrelevant, but there's fresher studies that we can rely on now. So it simply means that if the skill is scarce, you've got some of us that are sitting on those positions and we don't have the skills, but we are refusing to bring the new skills that are scarce because it's a threat to organizations as well, to people within the organization. But like I said, I was just really taking chances. But let's have a dedicated discussion on it when we also discuss the approaches, quantitative and qualitative. Mapamba, please unmute. We want to hear what you had to say.
From what I hear, the last presentation that was, I think maybe there's an issue where she mixed the things because maybe she just had something being attractive. Then she started to say, okay, let me try to follow. But I think she just have to go back and start to think to say, okay, what, and also maybe read about the approaches before you can start your research method, so that you really understand what do you want to do. Then once you are like that, once you are in that manner, then you start to look to say, okay, how can I come up with my analysis? Is my analysis need numbers, or it's just an analysis where I only have to focus on a small group of people? So if you focus on a small group of people, that gives you, let me say, can I say closely related answers that you look to say you can use to do your analysis. Then you don't need to go into quantitative, into looking at samples and so forth. You only look to say, okay, I'm going to focus on this particular group. But to me, my concern is like this. I do have got a topic on transfer pricing as a result of multinational companies, in particularly in South Africa. And from the number that I got, I think we have got a number of between 91 to 200 multinational companies in South Africa. So I was just looking to say, okay, what approach can I use in this manner when I want to only look at specific multinational companies that are using transfer pricing, to say, how will I get enough information to say, because there's an issue of POPIA, there's also an information issue of maybe they don't want to disclose their tricks of how to shift profits from South Africa to other jurisdictions that called tax havens, or that has got low tax income. So I think that's my issue. Thank you so much, Prof.
You know, Mapamba, I have a list of discussion that I want to take with you on what you just raised. Again, because the nature of this engagement, I think I'm meeting you for the first time, the nature of this platform is that we talk about concepts, but we see how these concepts apply in the research that all of us are undertaking. So that is not a conversation in a vacuum. Now, like I said to Nontle and Yukai, and Malebo, maybe I should reserve this for our next engagement, if you don't mind. Can we have a deal on that?
Yes, sir.